Hi, I am Michelle Woolley, a board member for Arlington Independent Media. We will be speaking with a candidate for the Democratic nomination for Arlington County Sheriff. Our panelists are Kim Phillip, co-founder and steering committee member of Arlington for Justice, board member of the Black Heritage Museum of Arlington, and former member of the county's Police Practices Work Group. Brad Haywood, Chief Public Defender for Arlington County and the City of Falls Church. Abby Raphael, former school board member at Arlington Public Schools. In this edition, the panelists will be speaking with Wanda Younger.
Hey, Wanda. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
My pleasure.
So what motivated you to run for sheriff?
Well, I retired from the sheriff's office in 2020 with 31 years of service, and I've always wanted to have a voice for those who were unable to have a voice at the sheriff's office. But when I retired, I started working with or volunteering with the NAACP Arlington branch. And what I found is that working with a group of people from different backgrounds, from different walks of life, when they band together for a particular cause, that you can actually make policy changes within the county. So that is what actually motivated me to run for sheriff in Arlington, because I understood that if you had a group of people with the same vision, with the same ideas, with the same advocacy, that you could actually make changes. And that was a main motivation for running for sheriff.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Good evening, Wanda. How are you?
Hi, Brad. I'm great. Thank you.
Great. So many people know that people with serious mental illness are disproportionately represented in the criminal legal system or involved in the criminal legal system. What many Arlingtonians don't realize is that reality is exponentially worse here. We have a jail with more than half of the detainees on psychotropic meds. We send more detainees from our jail to state hospitals for competency restoration than any other jurisdiction in the state, including Fairfax, which is 5 times the size of Arlington. Mm-hmm. I'm the chief public defender, as you know, and on Monday, my office was appointed to 10 cases. On Tuesday, we went to court and asked for competency evaluations for 5 of those clients. This isn't entirely the sheriff's fault. It may not be the sheriff's fault at all, but my question for you is, why is it this is happening? Why is it that people with serious mental illness are so overrepresented in Arlington's criminal legal system? And what is the sheriff's role in making that situation better?
Well, as you mentioned, the sheriff's office is not responsible for the people who come into the facility, but we are responsible for their care 24 hours a day. Some of the things that I would like to advocate for is to have a physician and a psychiatrist on site 24 hours a day. Currently, that's not the case. We do have nurses on site 24 hours a day, but they're only limited to what they could do. They have to call a doctor or psychiatrist if there's a crisis that's going on. So having a doctor and a psychiatrist on duty 24 hours, I think would be greatly beneficial to those in custody. I'm also advocating that we have paramedics on staff who are trained in psychiatric responses for crisis situations, so that when they address the underlying medical condition, that they can then have the skill sets necessary to address the mental health issues that occur within the detention facility. So it is an ongoing process. I'm committed to doing what we can to help those in our care, because we're responsible for them for 24 hours a day.
So you were just talking about one of the motivations for running is to create change. Mm-hmm. And on your website, I saw you talked about partnering with the police department and working on community policing. Yes. But you've also said that there is a staffing shortage in the sheriff's department. So what is your vision for working with the police and doing community policing, but how do you do it with the current staffing?
Well, current staffing, hiring is definitely an issue, but I also think the retention of staff is a main problem as well. In order to ensure that people remain within the sheriff's department, we have to increase morale. So that would be one of the areas that I will focus on in terms of right now the sheriff's office is an at-will agency, which means that the sheriff's office, the sheriff can hire you and then they can fire you without cause. And one of the things that I would like to remove from that is to create a for-cause employment so that there's due process, so that an individual is just not terminated based on a disagreement with the sheriff. There have to be a due process. So retention is one of the things that I think is key, but also what I would like to do is implement the auxiliary deputy sheriff program. And what that is a group of individuals from the community, whether it's a retired deputy sheriff, retired police, retired military, community member, they would volunteer their services within the sheriff's department. And that is one of the ways that I propose that we could staff our sheriff's department. It wouldn't cost any money, and it would be a supplement to the sworn staff that we already have. What I would like for the auxiliary deputy program to do is to be a part of the school system. I've spoken with many parents throughout the community who said that their kids don't feel safe in school. They don't feel safe going to the bathrooms. So with this auxiliary deputy sheriff program, they would not serve as a school resource officers. They won't have any weapons, but they would simply be there as mentors and as a safety figure. Obviously, that would be with the school board's approval, but that would be something that I would propose, and it would not cost anything.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for that. So are there any organizations like Offender Aid and Restoration that you would look to for additional partnerships to enhance services?
Absolutely. The Sheriff's Office is already partnering with Path Forward, formerly known as ASPAN. But one of the organizations that I would like to partner with is Arm in Arm, with the CEO, Kelvin Manners. And what they do is that with Arm in Arm, they reach not only Arlington, D.C., but also Maryland. There's a lot of people in the detention facility who don't necessarily live in Arlington. They may live in Maryland, they may live in D.C. And with Arm in Arm, they have outreach to all those areas, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. Arm in Arm, what they do is they provide peer-to-peer support for if someone has addiction problems. And it's just a mentorship to help people address their underlying issues and just to be successful. So yes, Arm in Arm would definitely be one of the programs. And I've already spoken with Mr. Manners in regards to that.
So as you know, I am involved in criminal justice reform advocacy, and when some people first get interested in those issues, you often hear them say, "Oh, we have to end private prisons," and what they're getting at is they don't think that detention facilities should profit off of human suffering or should profit off of incarceration. What a lot of people don't realize is that doesn't just happen in these private prisons; it also happens in local jails through the services that are provided by outside vendors, in the form of phone calls where the per minute rate is far too high, or the commissary or canteen where they charge 20 times what you would pay for a bag of chips at 7-Eleven. As sheriff, could you commit to having free phone calls by detainees in the facility, and also the commissary items being charged at a normal retail rate?
Well, certainly don't believe that the jails should profit from anyone who's incarcerated. And it's interesting that you asked this question because I spoke with a member from the ACLU in particular about this particular issue. And I know this was something that the ACLU had brought amongst the sheriffs throughout the state to discuss this specific topic of profiteering, and I would definitely work with ACLU so that we're not profiteering. So that is something that I've already started by reaching out and speaking with a member from ACLU about this, so yes.
Wanda, you have gone pretty hard against one of your opponents, citing what you said are ethical and misconduct issues. And some people have been concerned that maybe that crosses a line, it's gone a little bit too far. Do you stand by your statements and your approach on that?
Absolutely. As a law enforcement officer, we are held to a higher standard. I certainly believe in second chances. But as a law enforcement officer, when you lie during an investigation, there's just no room for second chances. There are people who have spent 10, 20 years in prison based on a lie. They can't get that time back. It is a fact. I believe that the opponent has admitted to that. But, you know, it's the truth. It's important that the voters know and be informed so that when they make a decision, when they go to vote, that they're fully informed of all the issues, any ethical issues that arise. And I stand by it because we're held to a higher standard and the community expects us to be truthful. We can't build trust with the community if we're not truthful and honest. So that's just critical integrity.
Okay, thank you for that. So my next question really has to do with the staffing for the courts. Is staffing for court security sufficient? And what improvements would you make in court security given the staffing issues that exist?
It still goes back to my plan of having auxiliary deputies and focusing on retention. Auxiliary deputies, it doesn't cost any money. Once I retired from the Sheriff's Department, I've been volunteering 3 years with Arlington NAACP, so I know there are a lot of people in the community who want to give back, who want to be a part of the community, who want to volunteer, and recruiting people to be auxiliary deputies. I don't find that would be difficult to do. So that would help supplement some of the full-time staff that we have with the auxiliary deputies. They would be fully trained. They would have a mission statement and have specific duties. So that would be good, yeah.
You are well aware of the problems with medical treatment at the jail, I know, just as because you know about them, but also with your involvement with the Arlington NAACP. As you know, after Daryl Beckton died, the sheriff ended their contract with Horizon, which is an abominable medical provider. At that time, there was a decision about whether to do in-house services. It sounds like you support in-house medical services. The sheriff, though, at the time decided to go with a different medical provider. And I remember having a conversation with the sheriff telling her there are no good jail medical providers and they aren't going to understand the scope of the problem either. And all the things have improved. They haven't improved enough. It sounds like you are aware of that. The issue then becomes, if we're aware of that problem, the issue becomes how do we actually make the change that is required? Because it costs a lot of money. And it's also, in my experience, there is a temptation because nobody's paying attention to what happens at the jail. In our community, people don't pay attention. You can fly under the radar and not call attention to a problem within the jail if you want. Mm-hmm. But the important thing, the right thing to do is to advocate loudly and boldly to try to make the change that is required. Mm-hmm. And my question for you, I guess, is assuming you support more in-house or county-funded jail medical services, how do you actually accomplish that objective? How do you convince stakeholders, how do you convince the county board to spend the money on that and make that a reality so we don't have these tragedies happen again?
Well, it's a matter of, one thing is for when you go in front of the county board, you ask for certain items for budgeting, and it's just reallocating some of the sources. I know recently that the Sheriff's Department just hired a public information officer. It's just a matter of priorities. Is that a priority, or is hiring in-house medical staff more of a priority? I know that the Sheriff's Office does not have a grant writer. That is a specific skill where there are plenty of grant options. Department of Criminal Justice Services, the Bureau of Justice Services. There's many organizations out there who are willing to provide grants, funding, but we would need a grant writer. So it's just prioritizing what you're requesting from the county in terms of funding and just putting those priorities in place. A grant writer for funding. I would argue, instead of having a public information officer, we could have a grant writer. So that's what ease some of the funding concerns, is just reallocating and applying for grants that are out there.
You spoke earlier about partnerships with organizations that are providing services to detainees in the jail. One area that it seems to me there could be more services is on workforce training, job skills. Do you have thoughts about what kind of partnerships there could be to provide those services in the jail and also paying detainees a reasonable wage for the work that they're doing, and then all of that to help their transition to be successful when they're released?
Yes, I used to work, when I was working with the Sheriff's Department, I worked for the Alternative Program section, and in that particular section, we oversaw the inmate work program, the work release program, and electronic home monitoring. So I'm definitely in favor of building skills for those in custody so that they could be better prepared when they re-enter the community. So partnering with the county, partnering with private organizations, we've done that as a part of that, my role in that particular time when I was working in the Sheriff's Department. So that would continue. So I'm in favor of that. It's just a matter of reaching out to different organizations. What we did, and we found that there were a lot of people in the community who were willing to partner with the Sheriff's Department to provide jobs for them. So I know that exists out there, and it's just a matter of outreach. And I certainly believe that the wages should be increased.
All right. Well, Wanda, thank you again for joining us this evening.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure
you.
seeing you all again.